and you're very welcome to join us. The third in our series of 4 project-enabled webinars on the theme of speed management. A big thank you, first of all, to Tom Duckham and the team at Red Speed International for their support of the series of 4 webinars. Today, we're focusing on tackling the disproportionate dangers on rural roads. And taking part will be David Llewellyn, David Powers Police and Crime Commissioner, Mark Brommel from NF Mutual Insurance, Sean Marr from Quartix, and I'm very pleased that we'll be joined by a couple of guests from Ireland because there is a Project Edward Day taking place there today. And we'll say hello to Superintendent Tom Murphy from An Garda Síochána and to Orla Maguire from South Dublin County Council at some point during this webinar. So let me set the scene. We know that rural roads are pretty much the most hazardous part of the road network, accounting for 70% more fatalities than urban roads and carrying around 4 times the likelihood of death per collision. Statistics reveal that 1 in 31 rural road collisions results in a fatality compared with 1 in 122 for urban areas. Now, that information comes from a rural road safety report from NFU Mutual. So we'll talk to Mark about that and other relevant topics. But it does underline the urgent need to re-examine speed management and safety strategies in rural settings. Unlike urban environments, rural roads carry a mix of fast-moving cars, large agricultural and commercial vehicles, as well as vulnerable road users such as cyclists, walkers, and horse riders. These groups share the same confined space, often with little margin of error when incidents occur. So we have plenty of time now to go through and start looking at some of the topics. I will talk for a few minutes to Mark and then to Commissioner Llewellyn and also to Sean. Simon Turner will be monitoring the chat function. So if you've got questions, please pop them into the chat conversation and we will monitor that and pick up on your questions or your comments as best we can. I should also say that this is being recorded. And so I will share a link to the recorded version, which will go on a Project website within a day or two of this taking place. Good. Let's begin. Let me go first of all then to Mark Brommel from NFU Mutual. Mark, welcome along. Just tell us a little bit about your role, what you do, and why today is relevant for you.
Yeah. And James, morning everyone, and thank you first for having me along. As you said, I'm Fleet Risk Manager, NFU Mutual. So I'm really pleased to contribute today, partly because this is something that I'm passionate about, something I care about. It also aligns really well with the values we have at NFU Mutual. And if I can take a moment just to explain, the NFU Mutual are a little bit different to most insurers in that we're a mutual. So that means we're owned by members, not by shareholders, and that structure it shapes how we operate. In that our priority isn't short-term profit, but is more long-term protection, support, and value for our customers. And obviously, rural areas are at the absolute heart of our business. We've got over 300 local offices and a background that's just rooted in farming and countryside life. So we and our employees understand the challenges faced by people who live and work in rural areas. And sadly, one of those challenges is road safety. And as you covered very well, the statistics consistently show that rural roads are disproportionately dangerous. So 2023, 63% of fatal collisions occurred on rural roads. And my specific role as Fleet Risk Manager is to help our customers, our fleet customers, better understand and manage those risks that are associated with operating their vehicle fleets. So I work closely with our underwriters and with our local agents to look at fleet performance, conduct loss control surveys, and provide recommendations which help our customers improve their safety, their compliance, and ultimately their claims outcomes.
How significant is speeding as a factor in collisions on rural roads, and what evidence does NFU Mutual have that supports that?
Yeah, I think There's lots of evidence around the significance that speed plays in collisions on any roads, not just rural roads. So obviously, vehicles are harder to control at higher speeds. Hazard perception is reduced and reaction times are reduced, and at the same time, braking distances are increased. We know that forces involved in collisions increase at the square of speed, and those forces directly affect the extent of injuries that are sustained. In terms of evidence, I think TRL, Transport Research Laboratory, have some research showing that hitting a pedestrian at 30 mile an hour has a 10% likelihood of fatality, and that raises to 80% at 50 mile an hour. So speed makes a massive difference. In terms of the occurrence, if we look at the Department for Transport Fatal 4 fact sheet, the speed fact sheet, and they've used Stats 19 data to show that most speed-related fatalities occur in rural areas. One of those statistics, that 70% of fatalities that involve somebody travelling too fast for the conditions were on rural roads. And in our own survey, respondents, or 44% of respondents, called for speed limits to be reduced in rural areas.
Thank you very much, Mark. Stay with us and we'll continue conversation. But if I could now move along to introduce the Dyfed Powys Police and Crime Commissioner, David Llewellyn. You're very welcome to join us, Commissioner. You will perhaps know that I am a resident of Dyfed Powys, a special constable based in Wrekin as well. So I have a little bit of a finger on the pulse of what's going on in Powys. And I can say that here in South Powys at the moment, it's wet and miserable. I hope where you are, the sun might be shining, but you're very welcome to join us, Commissioner. Tell us a bit about what rural roads in Dyfed Powys, from your point of view, where are they on your road safety agenda and what are the issues specific for Dyfed Powys?
Yeah, thank you, James. And can I also thank you for the volunteering work that you do within the force as well as a special constable, and the relationship actually that we've built up on a personal level over the last nearly 10 years now that I've been the Police and Crime Commissioner in Dyfed Powys. So the position that we have in the force area is that people might not be familiar with the geography. So we are 2/3 the landmass of Wales, covering mainly the mid and west areas. So we don't have a motorway within the force area. So the arterial routes are sort of mainly your some dual carriageways, but mainly A roads and many B roads. And sadly, what we've seen in recent years, certainly in the last 2 years, is that we have had some significant road fatalities, which is something that we are seeking to try and address, because we have something between 20 and 40 fatalities on the rural roads of Dyfed Powys on an annual basis. And of course, one of those deaths is one too many as far as I'm concerned. Some of the things that I've sought to do then, in my role as a Police and Crime Commissioner, I need to set the strategic priorities for the force. So roads policing fits within our protecting harm priority within my Police and Crime plan. And I try and ensure that it has and is elevated at more strategic level to ensure that chief officers within Dyfed Powys Police do see roads policing as an area that needs to be prioritised, an area that needs to be funded. And that, if I'm honest, has been on a bit of a journey within the force. There are other things that I'm involved in, engaging with the community, trying to empower community groups to be involved. And I might have an opportunity to speak a bit later on in relation to our community engagement that we do and speed watch that we have across the force area. But all of that basically is geared towards better educating, working with partners to ensure that where there are potential hotspots on the roads, that they are then potentially designed out, or that there's some road furniture that's put in place. And all of that is not necessarily always the responsibility of the police service, which is why we have to work with partner agencies and be involved in sort of raising awareness, such as Project Edward is vitally important and part and parcel of that activity. In the last 2 years, I've actually funded a dedicated bereavement service for those who sadly have lost loved ones on the road through these fatalities. I was the first Police and Crime Commissioner in Wales to introduce that facility and that service, and that now has been rolled out also to include North Wales, and that has been delivered across the force area. So that is something I'm quite proud of. But I wish actually I could make them redundant and put them out of work, and that we wouldn't have to be having these conversations about road safety. But that perhaps is just an introduction from me, James, and happy to answer any further questions as today goes along.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I was very excited myself on Monday morning. I was with my wife and my son driving from where we live, which is between Brecon and Bilth, heading towards Liverpool to drop him at university. An exciting and historic day. I think we were listening to The Doors playing Light My Fire as we came down towards Newtown on the A483, and there was a blue sign with a motorcycle warning, and it's called the Primes Project, which is so simple, and it came from Scotland, and I'm so pleased to see it in Newtown. And it is as simple as this, that you have two chevrons, each pointing in to give the rider the line to take round the road. And it's, I think, in Scotland, wherever they put them in, that they have eliminated casualties. And I hope that will happen. It's so good to see it translated and at work here.
Thank you, James. Just to mention, I think it's important also, sort of as a strategic leader within policing in my area, but also sort of a wider sort of remit to sort of Welsh and maybe England and Wales level, or across the UK and further afield, is that we seek to identify the best evidence. So if we've seen things like the work of Professor Alex Dedman, I think that had introduced and done some research in relation to those chevrons and the use of them, it is then our duty to implement some of that, and that is and potentially provide the funding that's needed in order to improve some of that. So I'm actually driving that way this evening. I'm off to Wrexham later on this evening, so I'll probably be passing, and I'll see them myself as well in situ. I think it's a bit early for us to assess their sort of impact in Dyfed-Powys as it stands, but hopefully if they will lead to fewer fatalities, because the motorcyclists in particular, they are a particular cohort that's affected in the fatality figures that we have in force. They are disproportionately represented within those fatality figures that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how it pans out, and we will evaluate that in time as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tavish Llewellyn. Let us move now and talk to Sean Marr from Quartix. Sean, you're very welcome to join us. And tell us a bit about what you're up to and how rural roads figure on your work agenda, and what kind of things you've done as interventions to reduce casualties and risk on them.
Yeah, indeed. So Quartix, we're primarily a vehicle telematics business, also based in Powys. This is a very Powys-themed call, isn't it? So we're based out of Newtown, but we cover the whole of the UK, Europe and the US. But we were heavily involved back in 2016 in the young driver insurance market. And the reason I go back that far is we were dealing with insurers who said that they were identifying that a lot of the fatalities they were getting in the young driver insurance market typically were aimed at rural roads. So we started to build what we called the Safe Speed database. And we realized relatively quickly that if you take the word young driver and change it to fleet driver, the risk is the same. But what it allowed us to understand is looking at anonymized data on any particular road across the UK, we could identify what the mean average speed looked like. We could identify then drivers who were driving above the top percentile, so for example, the top 5 percentile, and also people driving below the average percentile. And what this allowed us to do was come to customers and say, look, you've got vehicles here that are operating on typically rural roads where they may not be breaking the speed limit, but they're actually driving at the top end percentile. And I suppose the problem you always have to face with that is if you call somebody in and say you were driving at 54 miles an hour on a 60, the first thing you're going to get back from the driver is, well, I wasn't breaking the speed limit, because they're not. But the key point here is we're able to say, well, based on the evidence of other road users that are on that same section of road, we can really help you understand that you're putting yourself the business and the public at higher risk because you're driving at a speed that is deemed to be really not acceptable for that road type. And interestingly, based on all the data we get in, the traffic on rural roads accounts for around 43% of road travel. But as Mark alluded to earlier on, around 60% of deaths happen. So we kind of said, well, if we start to build this database, and it builds every day because we bring speed data points in as obviously data comes into our system, that's around 30 million data points of speed a day. We're able to help businesses understand where their drivers are putting themselves and others at risk by driving above the mean average flow of traffic rather than above the speed limit. So away from everything else we do around telling you where somebody is, what they're doing, what time they got there, what time they finished, we bring an extra level of detail in around the safety side of things to help businesses understand that their road risk is higher. And this obviously just doesn't affect rural roads. We can identify it on any road, urban, motorway, etc., etc. But we do understand that the rural road risk is really the highest area for fatality when people are actually still operating below the speed limit. And interestingly, what we did identify, looking at the data that we've collected, that if you take all of the rural roads that we've seen vehicles go along, the actual average top speed on a rural road in the UK is 34 miles an hour. So it's quite interesting when you see it that way.
Thank you very much. What I'm just going to do is refer to a couple of points that have come into our chat function. Andrew Curry, who I know I've met him before. We met in Bills Wells, Andrew. So thanks for joining us here on this from North Wales. Andrew stresses we need to define the term speeding. I only use that term to describe exceeding the legal speed limit. Most collisions do not involve speeding. That resonates with what you just mentioned there, Sean, about the average speed, but often excessive speed. And it's not the precise speed that causes collisions, but the lack of control and or position. And would you concur fully with that? Are there things we can interpret from that?
I mean, we use the word appropriate speed. Typically we also see that where a vehicle is driving in an area where, for example, there is a school or a hospital, you tend to see that the speed limits slow down because people are aware of the hazards around them. We kind of allude to the fact that we're looking at an appropriate speed for the road type. So yeah, when somebody then comes to a line manager and says, I wasn't breaking the speed limit, we fully accept that. But what we're saying is that the speed that you've driven is not appropriate for the road type that you've been driving on. And we obviously score drivers accordingly. So you are exactly right. The collisions, etc., that can come about, they obviously can be at any speed. But if we can identify that the vehicle, that there is potentially drivers that are regularly operating in, especially in that top 5 percentile, where it could be significantly below the speed limit, the line we would always say to a customer is that you are looking at people driving not at the appropriate speed. So yeah, that's how we would address it.
Thank you very much, Sean. Mark, let's go on and continue our conversation. Mark Bromwell, let's talk about road condition. How important significant is poor road condition or narrow lanes, limited visibility? What sort of impact do they have on speed management and overall safety?
I'm going to piggyback a little bit the answer that Sean just gave to that question. There's a difference between speed limits and safe speeds, and I think what we're getting into here is what's the safe speed for a road. Obviously, narrow lanes, limited visibility lowers the safe speed. The road surface increases braking distance, and what we're always looking for drivers to do, and what the highway code will instruct drivers to do, is to always be able to stop within the distance that you can see to be clear. So in order to do that, you need to be travelling at a safe speed for that road and that condition, and not just at the speed limit. What I'd always encourage people to realise as well is on narrow roads, where single track roads in particular, people coming the other way will also use that space that you can see to be clear. So very often you're not talking about being able to stop in the distance you can see to be clear. You're talking about stopping in less than half the distance that you can see clear. So blind corners on single track roads, we're talking about some very low speeds at that point.
Sean, let's just mention the safe speed and the relative speed score approach for fleets. Now, how does that provide the information? So, crucially, though, of course, the fleet manager needs to relay that information and persuade, cajole, encourage drivers to act on that information to keep themselves and those around them safe. Just talk through what happens downstream of getting those sorts of scores and information.
Yeah. So, I mean, we kind of, it's the analytics going on in the background is very sophisticated in order for it to be able to overlay the roadmap. If you think about it, we've got 1.8 million segments of road that we then overlay that on. The driver, the fleet manager, isn't interested in the mechanics going on behind that. What matters to them is, well, how do you put that in front of the driver? And the way we do that is we provide a league table, and we can show the driver, for example, will have a mobile app from us that they can look at when it's safe to do so. They can review where they've driven, and we will highlight areas where we believe that their speed has either exceeded the speed limit, or where we believe that they've been operating at inappropriate speed. And the whole idea then is that they will be able to see where they sit in a league. And with the best will in the world, nobody ever wants to be bottom of a league. If you use a football analogy, nobody wants to be a Wolves fan at the moment because they're bottom of the league. And the point here is that it prompts people to actually look at their behaviours, and obviously the change has got to come from the driver within. And I think if you give them the ability to understand what this information is and where it's coming from and how they understand it, then I think you will start to see significant change from drivers, as long as you give them the buy-in and the ability to identify it. I was demonstrating to a customer the other week where we were showing somebody doing 38 miles an hour in a 60, and they were at the 100th percentile. And the customer said, well, that's a really low speed. When we pulled it up, because the driver and the fleet manager can actually visibly go down to street view and see it, it was a blind bend on a single carriageway, a bit like Mark's just mentioned there. And, 34 miles an hour going around a blind bend on a single carriage is pretty quick. And we identified that was just happened to be the fastest vehicle we'd had on that particular route. But again, that's information then that you can share and show the drivers. For me personally, when we first introduced safe speed and driving style, I've been with Cortex 18 years, so I've seen this go through a lot of change. I honestly thought, like every person does, I was a safe, sensible driver. And then I saw my first ever driving score and thought, oh my goodness me, close your eyes, crime commissioner. But I kind of went, wow, I really didn't think it would be this bad. And, I've obviously then changed my behavior. One, because I sell the product and have to lead by example. But the other key point is that the cost to run my vehicle has come down significantly because I'm driving it more sensibly. We also know that if people are driving at those higher speeds, they are more likely to be involved in a collision, an at-fault accident, based on the percentages that they're going above the mean average flow. So you've got to get the driver involved, and the driver's got to understand that this is for their protection as much as the business. And we always say, bring the driver on that journey with you, definitely.
Okay, if I could bring Dappers Llewellyn in on this now and think about perhaps some targeted operations that the dummy powers will have done to address dangerous driving behaviours, particularly, any examples of rural road operations or initiatives and outcomes, and maybe what behavioural trends have emerged from them?
Yeah, actually, I could see Mark put his hand up. I don't know whether he wanted to respond to Sean's point. Sorry, James. I don't know whether Mark wanted to come back and then I kick him in then.
Okay, well, over to you.
If that's okay. Sorry to just nick your question, David. I was just around what Sean was saying. A couple of points I just want to expand on. And I really like the sound of the approach that Cortex technology takes, and would love to have a chat with Sean after this meeting at some point, because I think it's a really interesting way of monitoring the safe speeds rather than just the speed limits. What I find in my experience going out to see fleets is that most fleets will have telematics of some sort fitted. Most don't operate in that way, so speeding events will only pick up speed limits. But what fleet managers can still do with that is, that they'll normally pick up harsh events. So they'll pick up harsh braking events, harsh turning events, and those are also indicators of excess speed. So what I'd encourage fleet managers who don't have the technology that Sean's talking about is that there are still things that they can do. The other thing I find time and time again is the amount of fleets who invest in telematics and in technology and then don't use it effectively. Once you've made that decision to invest your money in fitting this technology, using it, monitoring how drivers are driving, and using coaches then to pick up where issues are. I'd also advocate the use of cameras on vehicles, because coaches can then use the footage from cameras together with the statistics coming from the telematics to engage the drivers and show them actually what it was doing and why it's a problem, and help them to identify what would be a more appropriate way to drive or a more appropriate speed. So thank you, David.
You'll be pleased to know, Mark, we do all of that as well. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's that level of safe speed that makes us slightly different to others, bringing that different level in. But yeah, anyway, thank you.
But fleet drivers, I think, account for about a third of road users. So for the 2/3 of us who aren't protected by any kind of corporate kind of in investments, we need to have a direct line of contact with the authorities, or with engagement from road safety organisations, and so that's where the Police and Crime Commissioner might be able to help us. What happens in Dynamic Powers? What has happened and been successful? And what sort of ideas? What kind of suggestions from you?
Yeah, thank you, James. I think that point around whether we've been successful or not is quite an interesting one, actually, especially in the climate that we currently have over the last 2 years. As I say, our fatalities have actually risen slightly. I think generally our KSI data, which is our killed and serious injury, that those figures are relatively stable, so they haven't necessarily increased. It's just that we have sadly seen the number of fatalities increase. Across the whole of Wales, I think the fatalities have reduced, however. And again, Welsh Government, those of you who have obviously been following the changes in legislation in Wales, have been citing the change from 30 to 20 and how that has been a positive factor. The reality in David Powys is that we haven't actually seen the impact of that, because the majority of our fatalities happen in the plus 50 miles an hour speed limit areas. So it's the national speed limit areas, and all of the points that have been raised by Sean and Mark play into that in terms of the suitability and the appropriate speed being used by drivers. And actually speed is very often cited as the main causation factors for the majority of our fatalities. But in terms of operations, numerous operations. I mentioned earlier about the need for us to work in partnership. So we do things such as a recent Operation in Vigour, which is one that we do with the Driver Vehicle Standards Agency and the local authority as well, where we stop vehicles and try and ensure that they've got the right sort of paperwork in place, whether make sure that they're not overloaded, that we've got tyre defects that have been spotted, etc. Now, the result of those is that obviously we tend to find drivers, and that there's an impact there from a financial point of view, which actually is just part of the activity. We're not out to seek to gain sort of financial gain for the authorities, which I think very often is in the discourse around speeding and infringements on the road. People all that's seen as a negative thing. That's not what we're there to do. We're actually there to try and influence driver behaviour so that they do slow down. And we also try and target areas where we have had either community concerns raised, or there is a hotspot for fatalities on those roads. So we've also got things like Operation Snap, if people aren't familiar with that. So if you've got dash cam footage of somebody that's breaking the law or being in an antisocial way, you can actually go on to Operation Snap online and you can upload that footage. And again, that is then analysed by an investigator to see whether there have been infringements, and they do lead to prosecutions of drivers, sort of by information from a third party, which is members of the public uploading. So Operation Snap is quite embedded within the force. And then We also do a lot to try and raise awareness of safety for motorcyclists. So we have, it used to be called Operation Darwin. It's now called, it's linked to a national operation now, which is Operation Apex. And again, that is the widest sort of safety on the roads, but linked in particular to motorcyclists. And what we tend to do in those engagements is engage with the motorcyclists. So we get a lot of motorcyclists that come into Mid and West Wales because of the picturesque area that we have, and the various roads which are quite nice roads to drive, and have routes to undertake. But sadly, we then see individuals on occasions where they get tired or they make poor decisions in terms of maybe their appropriate speed, as was alluded to earlier, and they, as I said earlier, had a disproportionate cohort. So the police are engaging. So it's a balance, really, I suppose. What the police are trying to do is work with other partner agencies and have a balance between enforcement and that education as well. And we are doing a lot through our schools programme, linking in with the fire authority as well, to run programmes to educate young drivers. Because when we look at things which are referred to as the sort of fatal five, one of them is in relation to young drivers, maybe with a few passengers on board as well, and that education of the young drivers is vitally important. Just one final point to mention then, we do and try and provide an agency to community groups in this space as well. So we have community engagement and empower communities to have a speed watch within their area. So that is where I, as the Commissioner, have funded community groups to come together. They receive some training from the police just to make sure that they're safe in undertaking this work. And what they then do is they monitor the speed coming through their village, and they then take a note of that registration, and a letter is sent to that individual as a first layer of educating drivers in relation to the speed on the roads in the Dyfed-Powys area. So that's been quite powerful in different ways, but one for me, I think, is just that empowerment of local communities who feel that they want to be involved and engaged in that reducing of the speed locally in their communities. And James, you mentioned Powys, the county that you live in. Powys is one of the counties that actually has a very high take-up of the community speed watch activity, which again has proved to be successful from a point of view of giving the communities that agency and empowering them to be involved in that process. So we describe maybe our enforcement activity in Dyfed-Powys as a layering approach, where we have the layering of that community speed watch. We then have something which is referred to as Go Safe, which are the sort of vans that go out, the speed vans. We've got things like OpSnap that I mentioned, which is part of Go Safe. And then we also have the roads policing officers. And then the further layering is the partnership working with the likes of the Driver Vehicle Standards Agency and others in more structured operations that will happen on the roadside, in lay-bys or car parks, etc. So, yeah, lots of activity taking place. We've started recently as well to engage more in a more structured way with our community safety partnerships, and there is a subgroup now of each of the community safety partnerships, which is a particular road safety subgroup. It started in Powys a couple of years ago, but we now sought to roll that out across the other counties. And again, it's all about trying to come together as partners to see how we can, whether it be the need to design out, particular issues within, the road conditions were mentioned earlier. I mentioned some of the issues in relation to the road furniture, the signage, all of those things. They're not the responsibility solely of the police service. If they're a highway, then that would be the unitary authority. And if it's a trunk road, then that would be Welsh Government as well. So there's that partnership working.
Oh, David, thank you very much for that. It's not normally my habit of editorializing the interview.
At the Bradwell's home, you can ask Mary to report. Ashes or was
I haven't got Siri running. There we are. That's fine. Thank you. I don't generally editorialize, but I will just say, Project Edward is very keen to support any moves for consistency in OpSnap, in what they call more generally journey cam submissions, and actually what happens to those submissions, and force by force is is very inconsistent. Some forces are right on it and they'll have systems in place, and others, you'll be lucky if your submission is even viewed. There certainly won't be a warning letter or further action. And I think as in a mobile society where we might cross 2, 3, 4, 5 force areas during a road journey, we should expect a similar kind of service or outcomes as from the police forces. So that's Project Edward's little bit of that's me on my soapbox, and we do have some conversations that we're part of with the group that runs that to aim for better consistency. With that in mind, let me just remind you that you are watching our third of 4 speed management webinars. This one is on rural roads, and thank you to Red Speed International for supporting it. But now let us just take a moment or two to move away from our shores and across the Irish Sea, because I'm very pleased to say that while we're having this webinar, while this is all going on, it is actually Project Edward Day in the Republic of Ireland. And here to help me talk about that and find out more about it, Orla Maguire from South Dublin County Council, and Superintendent Tom Murphy from An Garda Síochána. Let me just also say that I've done something slightly strange. There is another Tom Murphy and I've given you rights as a presenter. Tom Murphy with the red truck behind you, the screen. Are you? It might just be more convenient for you to just turn your camera off, because I thought you were the Tom Murphy that's from An Garda Síochána, but I think there's 2 Tom Murphys on the call. Thank you. So Superintendent Thomas Murphy, are you with us?
Morning, James. Morning, folks. Yeah.
Hello. And Orla, you're there with us too, aren't you?
I'm here, yeah.
Good. Well, look, let's just set the scene. Project Edward, I was involved in 2019. We had a great big day in Ireland on the 19th of, in 2019, it was about the 26th of September, I think. Why is it still happening in Ireland, and what's the benefits from your point of view? Orla, perhaps you'll take that.
Okay, thanks for having us, James. Well, we decided this year that we wanted to mark the day again and make it a special occasion. So I work with South Dublin County Council, so some of my colleagues in other East Coast LAs. We have Dublin City, Dunleary, Rathdown, Wicklow and Fingal County Council. So 5 of us came together to speak with one voice and promote Project Edward today, Wednesday the 17th. Then my colleague Tom jumped on board with roads policing. So it's actually happening as we speak. As I was coming into work today, I saw the Gardaí on the road having pulled somebody in for who knows what they've done. But it's raising road safety awareness, and that's what it's all about. That's what we want to achieve. So the East Coast LAs came together. We've done a great press release. We have photograph footage and we have Garda involvement. So we're hoping that today might be one day in the Republic without a road death. If we can get there, it'll be the first to hear.
And Tom Murphy, tell us about your perspective. I think you and I both aged a lot over a very few days in the run-up to our big event in 2019, but I have very fond memories of it. From a policing perspective then, let's just look at how An Garda Síochána is perhaps using Project Edward today for road safety engagement or enforcement. Tell us your kind of activity plan for today.
Good to meet with you again, James. And it was a good event in 2019, all right, some years ago. But today, I suppose Orla was the instigator behind it, with her other colleagues and road safety officers in the various local authorities. And from a Garda National Bureau perspective, Roads Policing Bureau perspective, it's an area for development there to work alongside road safety officers from the local authorities to get the message out locally, specific messages on that. And when Orla flagged that she was looking to run Project Edward, we were again very committed to supporting them in their role there, with the result of having specific roads policing activities around the counties of Dublin and Wicklow, speed checkpoints and that sort of thing to advertise and to give full access to social media as well, both from local authorities and from the Garda perspective, to show that the operations are in place.
Let's talk about the main kind of priorities, perhaps in speed management. Give us a sort of overview, not just for today on Project Deadwood Day, but how you address issues of speeding or inappropriate speed on your many miles or kilometres of rural road.
Well, in the last 2 years, we've had a significant financial investment in relation to handheld speed detection devices. So we use 2 different types of cameras there, and they're the most up to date, and we're working on developing them further. In addition, then as well, we have launched a number of static fixed camera sites around the country, 9 in the last year, and we also have a number of average speed camera systems as well, which are working, unfortunately, detecting too many speeders, but the message is getting out there slowly but surely. In relation to the camera. Some counties have really taken to it. For example, Galway, where detections are less than 100 in a month, and other parts of the west of Ireland there, where there are multiples of hundreds, same type camera system, but not heeding it. So it is helping. It's a slower rollout for people, the public, to tune into, but the message is being constantly rolled out, and with Orla and our colleagues there as well, but just get that message out more on a local basis rather than people maybe missing it on national broadcasting and that sort of thing. So I think that local messaging is the next natural step in helping us reduce speed levels.
Yeah.
We've also...
Sorry, Tom, I was just going to say, to jump in on that, we did our motorbike campaign there on the Maybank holiday weekend, which again Tom supported, and that was hugely successful. That was aimed at motorcyclists on rural roads that cross the Wicklow Mountains. So we'd Wicklow on one side, Dublin on the other, and we have carry boards going down the motorway, showing the statistics. There was 3 motorcycle fatalities last year in Dublin, and on the other side in Wicklow I think there was 3 as well. So these boards will hopefully change going forward. And we did a radio advertisement campaign, and we did a multi-agency launch, which was very visual, very effective. And we managed, I think, to stay static for about 4 to 5 weeks at 10 fatalities. Unfortunately, I think they're about 24 now today. So it's terrible statistics, but trying to target specific areas at local level, as Tom says, is the way forward, I think.
So you mentioned success. It was successful. Is that in terms of, would you measure that in terms of the number of Kieran seriously injured, or the number of people that you've engaged with? What are the...
We had very positive feedback from the radio campaigns. A lot of people saying they'd heard the advert, which to us is very positive. And then to maintain the fatalities at static level for a couple of weeks after the campaign was very helpful to us too. I haven't gone into the full analysis yet. It's too soon. But just to see that initially was very beneficial.
I'm going to editorialise again, I'm afraid, because I'm a great fan of how An Garda Síochána, the Irish Police Force, publish data very quickly after an incident. So I receive, because I'm on your recipient list for your press releases, so within a few hours of a fatal collision occurring, there is a press release. That obviously there's no personal data that's given, but and every day you update your website with the statistics, so you can know to date, right now, from 9 o'clock this morning, accurate till then, how the statistics look compared to the same period up until September the 17th last year. And that must be hugely helpful for you in terms of identifying trends and not knee-jerk reacting, but just sort of seeing what's going on. Far better, I think, than a system that we are stuck with here, where we have to wait until sometime into next year before we can reveal what the 2025 figures are. Tom, just tell us, is that a complex thing? Do you have to put a lot of investment into it, and why do you do it that way?
Quite simply, Dan, it's really just an Excel spreadsheet that's updated on a daily basis and circulated around to various government departments and senior Garda management. At the mall, like at 8:30 this morning, I received my email in relation to it, and unfortunately, we had a fatality yesterday evening over in Galway, an 85-year-old female. So that brought the total up to 117 fatalities, which is 6 down on this day last year. So that's the up-to-date figures on it. Now, what we did in relation to the sheet this year was that we created a new section in it that we were able to give a breakdown per county, rather than just Garda divisions. We've done that as well, but the new columns is for, say, local authorities can see immediately then how it affects their relevant county rather than Garda division, which may overlap some counties. So it's very to monitor once we stay on top of it. Every morning it's done by my own staff here and circulated out. So yeah, it's just a simple Excel sheet with the most up-to-date information.
I'm sure it's of great value in terms of your relationships with the media and their ability to report.
Well, they have access to the public as well, Garda.ie, and those figures are updated on a daily basis.
Well, look, Superintendent Tom Murphy and Oliver Guire, thank you both for joining us, and good luck with Project Edward Day today. I'm going to make a promise now that we're going to join you next year for this, and we'll make a plan and do some good stuff, and collaborate and see where we can go with making something good for Ireland in 2026. But for now, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm now going to return to the main theme of our rural road safety speed management. Just whizzing through some of the chat that we've got here. This from Derek. This is I guess for the commissioner, and I don't know if you'll have data to answer this, but have 20-mile-an-hour limits in Wales had a displacement effect onto rural roads through apps such as Waze that will calculate journey times?
Yeah, I haven't got any sort of detailed evaluation and statistics that I can call upon, but it is something that we have certainly in the Dyfed Powys area, a nagging feeling that it probably has. That's just a professional judgment. I've heard that from some of our collision investigators, that and it's difficult to describe it, but the concertina effect that happens with the 20s in Wales means that are people trying to catch up when they then get into the sort of dual carriageway and sort of faster stretches of the road is something that we are questioning. But we can't lose sight of the fact that overall, in terms of the killed and serious injury incidents across the whole of Wales, there has been a reduction. But I think, as I said earlier, that the 20s and 30s aren't going to dramatically impact the number of fatalities in the area that I'm the commissioner for. But we haven't got any sort of statistics that can point me in that direction as of yet, but it is something that we have a belief. And just to respond to one of the other comments that I think Tony placed, I wasn't aware of the auto speed watch. I've just Googled it, so I am now aware of it, and I'm interested. So it'll be something that potentially we could seek to try and roll out in the Dyfed Powys area, which again would be an enhancement of that community sort of speed watch initiative activity. So I could see that as one of the comments in the chat as well, James.
Thank you, because I was just about to send that your way. Okay, Roger says we have SIDs, I think speed indicator devices, which could put out messages, recommended speed. If we have, the national speed limit, which for cars and motorbikes is 60 miles an hour, a recommended speed for particular locations, possibly. Let's bring Sean and Mark into this. It's enforcement in rural areas is at best thin, because there just aren't the resources to do anything, and often the actual road landscape is very difficult to have any kind of enforcement happening unless a vehicle's just happening to go past. So we now need to think of some ideas from either of you, from both of you, that may help to educate and engage drivers. So, Sean, over to you.
I mean, the key thing is like anything, data is king. The data doesn't lie. The data will tell you what is happening and what has been happening. And I think, again, I always say to all of the customers that I onboard with our product is that you do definitely want to be engaging drivers. You want drivers and more importantly, the management as well to be reviewing the information that we have. And you can get bogged down with data. That's the other problem. I mean, saying that as a tracking company, people might think, what's he talking about? His job is to provide data. But I think you've also got to see the wood from the trees as well and make sure that you're sending data across that is relevant to the subject that you're dealing with. There are conversations around, do you put something in the cab that will alert the driver to the fact they're doing something dangerous? Companies do that. We don't. We believe that there is enough distraction on the road and in the vehicle already without you having another element of alerting and buzzing and flashing and beeping or a voice telling you to slow down. I think that would kind of scare me, actually, if I was driving along on my own on a quiet evening and my car starts talking to me. So for us, it's about the education of the driver and bring it into company policy as well. That's a key point. If you're going to use this data to make your fleets more efficient and safer, then you need to ensure that there's policy in there that explains to drivers what it is you're going to manage and what you're going to look at and how you're going to deal with it. Because, as I said right at the very beginning, people will say the defense is I wasn't speeding, but the counter argument is you weren't speeding, but it's an inappropriate speed based on what I can see looking, for example, at this blind bend on Street View or from your camera footage, etc. So the short answer to the question is bring the drivers on the journey with you, make sure they understand why you're collecting that data, what it means, how it affects them, and let them understand it so that they can analyze it themselves and make informed decisions about their own safety and their own behavior. The key point is we want everybody to go home at night. Thomas mentioned there, a lady dying on the road yesterday. That's tragic. And, we want to ensure that our system is used to ensure that every driver that we've got a tracking unit in gets home safely based on the fact that we can help them understand where their own risk is coming from. So that's kind of how we would suggest it's dealt with. But the same point, and Mark, you'll probably take over from this. We're not risk managers. We're giving you the information that says there is the risk. Quartix do not promote ourselves as we're gonna make everything right by putting you on training courses, etc. That's not what we do. We give you the ability to identify there is a problem and there's a risk, and then you need to move to the next level of professionals that can then help you understand where those risk changes can come through education, through insurance opportunity. That kind of scenario. So we give you the facts so that you know what you've got to do next. And Mark, I guess that's where you jump in straight on top of that, I would imagine.
I can do, Sean. Yeah. If I can take a moment to do a little plug first. At the same time as publishing Rural Road Safety Report, NFU Mutual also published a code for countryside roads, which is research and advice from a number of different experts for different types of road users on how to safely use rural roads. That document, if anyone wants to have a look, is available free of charge to everybody on our website. So I'd encourage people to have a look at that because I absolutely recognise what's key to managing this is a lot around public education and the ability to recognise what is a safe speed rather than a speed limit. From a fleet perspective, I think before we get on to monitoring and enforcement of speeds, there's a piece around communication and training. So fleets do have responsibilities towards their employees, and I'd encourage them to talk to your drivers, engage your drivers, whether that's through written communication, face-to-face communication, but identifying what the hazards are on their duties and helping them to understand the risks, particularly of inappropriate speed. And I'd also encourage in-cab driver training for fleet drivers as a way of taking that next level. And I think there's been a few comments from Andrew Curry in here, which are all really good factors and kind of stuff that a professional driving instructor or a well-trained coach can help get those skills into drivers. In terms of the monitoring of telematics, as I covered earlier, I think it's really important that fleet managers look at the performance of the drivers using whatever statistics they have and management information they have available from these devices, and recognise who's doing well for a start. So I don't say let's not use this to beat people up. Let's highlight people who are doing really well too, and that will help to get some buy-in. But then with drivers who are displaying behaviours that we would want to change, then using coaches, using that data and any camera footage that we have can also help to change those behaviours. I'm not sure I disagree with Sean on it, but in terms of warnings within cabs, I think if I plug the last webinar in your series, James, you had someone on talking about intelligent speed assist, which I think
Richard Rove, Sheffield University.
Yeah, really interesting talk he gave, and well worth going back to have a look at it if you missed it. But the ability of that technology to identify speed limits and inform the driver, and possibly also enforce that within the cab in some way, is a technology for the future. I'd love to see that, because an issue I can see with that at the minute is it's linked to speed limits. If it could be linked to some kind of database, such as Sean is using or has developed, to start warning people what's an unsafe speed, then I do wonder. And just a thought: if anyone's inventive enough to go out and create that, whether that's the way forward.
Mark, thank you very much. We need to wrap this up in the next couple of minutes. So I'm going to invite everybody who is contributing to this, just for your tip on rural road safety, and particularly perhaps relating to speed. Let's start with Davith Llewellyn then. Just a tip from you. 10 seconds worth of good road safety tip.
Just reduce your speed, I think, full stop. It would be my point, quite simply.
Okay, thank you very much.
Why are we all in a rush? Let's just calm down and reduce your speed.
Oh, I think we'll have to come on to that, because we know that people like to speed. They may not be in a rush to get somewhere. They just like the thrill of it. That's a whole new topic. We can't go on that now. Tom Murphy, quick tip from you then.
I think make the message of reducing speed a local issue, a local community issue, and get that message out that way.
Orla Maguire?
I would agree with the speed one, but just to throw in something different to eliminate distracted driving if possible.
Mark Bromwell.
I think hazard perception, just to add one in there. So education around what the hazards are on countryside roads, and how to better behave around them.
Sean Marr.
I would mirror Thomas, but rather than say make it county-wide, I'd be saying make it company-wide, because obviously we're tracking company fleets and the duty of care sits with the company. So have the company message that be safe when you're out there. We want you to come home safe.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you very much, everybody. Davith Llewellyn, Mark Bromwell, Sean Marr, Orla Maguire, and Superintendent Tom Murphy. And really grateful for your expertise and your wise contributions to the conversation today. And I think that is all we've got time for. So our next, the fourth of our 4 speed management webinars, takes place in mid-November. Watch out for a recording of this. I shall download what we've recorded and pop it onto the Edward website as soon as we can afterwards. But for now, do keep in touch with us through other things that we're doing as well. There's plenty going on the Edward calendar. For now, from me, James Luckhurst, and everyone here at Project Edward, thank you so much for joining us. It's goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.